The law of Gaia, the pattern that controls human civilization, is it a real possibility or just a figment of humanity's imagination? A mere urban legend? Is this rumor ultimately a good thing or a bad thing? Tonight, once again, we'll examine whether it's true or not from a Japanese perspective. What if the rise and fall of every great civilization in human history was not random? What if the location of power, the center of culture, the seat of the world's dominant civilization, has been moving, rotating, following a precise geometric pattern around the surface of the Earth for the last 10,000 years? And what if that pattern, once you see it, predicts exactly where the next center of world civilization will emerge? And when? This is the law of Gaia. It is not taught in any school. It is not discussed in any mainstream academic journal. In Japan, where it originated, it is debated in whispered conversations among historians, geographers, and people who have looked at the map of history and seen something that cannot be unseen. Once you understand it, the entire history of human civilization looks different. Not like a random sequence of empires rising and falling. Like a clock, turning, precisely, on a schedule that no single human being designed. Part 1. Every civilization eventually falls. This is one of the most documented patterns in human history, and also one of the most uncomfortable. Egypt, Babylon, Greece, Rome, the Islamic Golden Age, the Mongol Empire, the British Empire. Each one rose, dominated, and then declined, replaced by something new, somewhere else. Historians have proposed many explanations for why this happens. Economic overextension, military overreach, climate change, disease, internal corruption. Each explanation accounts for the specific fall of a specific civilization without claiming to explain the pattern itself. But what if the pattern itself is the thing that needs explaining? What if the sequence of civilizations, where they rise, where they peak, where they decline, follows a law? Not a metaphorical law, a geometric law, a physical law, the kind of law that can be mapped, measured, and used to make predictions about the future with the same confidence that astronomers use orbital mechanics to predict the position of planets. That is the claim of the law of Gaia, and the evidence behind it is more difficult to dismiss than you might expect. Part 2. To understand the law of Gaia, you need two pieces of background. The first is the Gaia hypothesis itself, the scientific framework from which the law takes its name. In 1972, British scientist James Lovelock proposed that the Earth is not merely a rock with life on its surface, but a single, self-regulating system, a superorganism, in which the biological, chemical, geological, and atmospheric components of the planet interact to maintain conditions suitable for life. He named this concept after Gaia, the Greek personification of the Earth as a living being. The Gaia hypothesis was initially dismissed by mainstream biology. It was accused of being teleological, of implying that the Earth acts with intention. Over the following decades, as the evidence for planetary-scale self-regulation accumulated, it was progressively incorporated into Earth systems science. It is now the conceptual foundation of climate systems research. The Earth, the Gaia framework established, is not a passive stage on which life performs. It is an active, responsive system, one whose behavior at planetary scale reflects properties that no individual component of that system was designed to produce. The second piece of background is the work of a Japanese researcher named Moriyasu Yoshino. In the 1980s and 1990s, Yoshino, working from a synthesis of historical geography, archaeoastronomy, and earth science, proposed what he called the law of Gaia, a theory about how the Gaia system influences not just the planet's physical environment, but the location and timing of dominant human civilizations. His claim was geometric, specific, and when you lay it over the historical record, it is difficult to explain as coincidence. Part 3. The geometric pattern. Yoshino's theory begins with a specific observation about the geography of ancient civilizations. The earliest known centers of complex human civilization, Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley, the Yellow River Basin, ancient Egypt, are not randomly distributed across the Earth's surface. They cluster at specific latitudes and longitudes. And when you connect them, when you trace the movement of civilizational dominance from one center to the next across thousands of years, a pattern emerges. The pattern is a spiral. Specifically, a westward moving spiral that advances approximately 1/6 of the Earth's circumference, 60 degrees of longitude, with each major civilizational shift. 1/6, 60 degrees. The same geometric division that appears in the structure of a hexagon. The same ratio that appears in the honeycomb, in the crystalline structure of water, in the natural packing of spheres under equal pressure. The Earth, Yoshino argued, organizes the location of its dominant civilizations the same way nature organizes its most efficient structures. The historical sequence lets trace the sequence and see what happens. The earliest identifiable center of complex human civilization is Mesopotamia, the Tigris-Euphrates River Valley in what is now Iraq. Approximately 3,500 BCE. This is where writing was first developed, where the wheel was first used, where the first cities were built. Move approximately 60 degrees of longitude westward. You arrive at the Nile Valley, Egypt, beginning its period of peak cultural and political dominance at roughly 3000 BCE and sustaining it for 2,000 years. Continue the westward movement. Another 60 degrees. You reach the eastern Mediterranean, Greece, and subsequently Rome. The classical civilizations that formed the cultural foundation of the Western world, dominant from roughly 800 BCE through 400 CE. Continue. Another 60 degrees. You reach Western Europe, the centers of the Islamic Golden Age in the Iberian Peninsula, followed by the Renaissance in Italy, followed by the dominance of Spain, Portugal, France, Britain, the successive Western European powers that shaped the world from the 15th through the 20th centuries. Continue the pattern. Another 60 degrees westward from Western Europe. You cross the Atlantic. You arrive at the east coast of North America, the United States of America, which emerged as the dominant civilizational power of the 20th century. And here is where the pattern becomes something more than historical description. Because if the law of Gaia is real, if the westward spiral continues at its historical pace, the next center of dominant civilization should be emerging approximately 60 degrees west of the eastern United States. 60 degrees west of New York is the middle of the Pacific Ocean. But 60 degrees west of the western United States, the current leading edge of American cultural and economic power, Silicon Valley, Los Angeles, brings you to approximately the longitude of Japan. And continuing the spiral's established movement brings you to East Asia broadly, Japan, China, Korea, and the Pacific Rim. The law of Gaia, applied to the historical pattern, predicts that the center of world civilization is in the process of shifting to East Asia. This is not a fringe economic forecast. It is the dominant prediction of mainstream geopolitical analysis in 2025. The rise of China, the economic dynamism of East Asia, the shift of global economic gravity toward the Pacific. These are the top-line findings of every major strategic analysis produced by Western think tanks and governments over the past 20 years. The law of Gaia predicted this shift before those analyses existed. Using geometry, using a pattern established across 5,000 years of civilizational history. The timing component, the spatial pattern, is striking. The timing component is what makes it genuinely unsettling. Yoshino's theory does not just identify where civilizations arise. It proposes a cycle length, a period of time that each dominant civilizational center holds before the shift moves on. The approximate duration, based on the historical record, is between 500 and 1,000 years, with the most coherent readings suggesting a cycle of approximately 600 to 800 years for full civilizational flowering and decline. Mesopotamia flourished for approximately 2,000 years, a longer period that Yoshino attributed to the longer establishment phase of the first center. Egypt for roughly 2,000 years. Greece and Rome together for approximately 1,200 years across their combined arc. Western Europe's dominance, from the Renaissance through the 20th century, spans roughly 500 years in its peak expression. The United States as the world's dominant power reached its peak arguably in the second half of the 20th century. The shift, the movement of civilizational gravity toward East Asia, is, in the framework of this timeline, precisely on schedule. Not ahead of schedule, not behind, on the schedule that the last 5,000 years of history established. The Earth itself as the regulator, this is the element that separates the law of Gaia from simple historical pattern recognition. Yoshino's claim was not just that civilizations happen to rise in a westward-moving sequence. His claim was that the Earth system, the Gaia system, actively produces the conditions for civilizational emergence at specific locations and specific times through mechanisms that include climate, geomagnetics, soil composition, and what he called telluric energy, currents of electromagnetic activity within the Earth's crust that influence the biological and cognitive environments of the populations living above them. This claim is speculative in its mechanistic detail, but its underlying premise, that the Earth's physical systems create conditions that favor or disfavor complex social organization, is not speculative at all. It is established science. Jared Diamond's Guns, Germs, and Steel, published in 1997 and awarded the Pulitzer Prize, makes Part 4. The Scientific Theory, Earth Systems and Civilizational Geography. The most scientifically grounded version of the law of Gaia draws on established Earth science and geography to explain why civilizational centers shift without invoking anything beyond documented physical mechanisms. Solar irradiance patterns change over centuries in ways that affect agricultural productivity in specific regions. Ocean circulation shifts, the kind of multi-decadal oscillations now tracked by oceanographic research, alter rainfall patterns across entire continents. Geomagnetic field variations influence cosmic ray penetration, which influences cloud formation and climate at regional scales. None of these mechanisms, taken individually, predicts a 60-degree westward shift in civilizational power. But the combination of them, operating over the timescales that civilizational rise and fall actually occupy, could plausibly create systematic patterns in which regions become more or less favorable for the development of complex societies. The scientific version of the law of Gaia is not that the Earth has intentions. It is that the Earth's physical systems produce patterns that human civilizational development is sensitive to, and that those patterns have a geometry that reflects the underlying physics of the planet. This is not proven, but it is not physically absurd. The historical and archaeological theory, the historical case for the law of Gaia rests on the pattern itself, the documented sequence of civilizational centers that, when mapped geographically, traces the 60-degree westward movement that Yoshino identified. The strongest version of this argument notes that the pattern holds across cultures and time periods that had no contact with each other and no awareness of the broader civilizational sequence they were part of. The Mesopotamians did not know they were following the Egyptians. The Greeks did not know they were inheriting a pattern from Mesopotamia. The pattern is not the result of cultural transmission. It emerges independently at each node. Independent emergence of the same pattern at the same geometric intervals is what separates a genuine pattern from a coincidence. And the civilizational sequence that the law of Gaia describes does appear to represent independent emergence rather than cultural inheritance. The archaeological objection is that the pattern depends on which civilizations you choose to include and how you define the boundaries of civilizational dominance. Different choices produce different patterns. The law of Gaia requires a specific mapping that, critics argue, has been selectively constructed to fit the theory. This is a legitimate methodological concern. It does not make the pattern disappear. It raises the question of how robust the pattern is across different reasonable mappings of civilizational history. That question has not been rigorously tested. The psychological theory, pareidolia and pattern hunger, the human brain, is the most sophisticated pattern recognition system in the known universe. It is also, as a result of that sophistication, prone to finding patterns where none exist, a cognitive tendency called pareidolia when applied to visual information, and apophenia when applied to information generally. The psychological critique of the law of Gaia is that it is a compelling example of how a pattern-hungry brain, given the enormous complexity of human history and the freedom to define what counts as a civilizational center, can find a geometric sequence that fits a predetermined conclusion. There have been empires and cultural centers on every continent across human history. The freedom to choose which ones constitute the dominant civilizational sequence and where to locate their geographic center is significant. The same historical data, with different reasonable choices, might produce a different geometric pattern or no pattern at all. This critique is important. It establishes that the law of Gaia, as presented, requires independent verification with pre-specified criteria before it can be considered genuinely predictive rather than retrospectively constructed. What the psychological critique does not explain is why the specific pattern Yoshino identified, the 60-degree westward sequence, corresponds so precisely to the geopolitical predictions that mainstream strategic analysis has independently arrived at. If the pattern were purely retrospective construction, it should not have predictive power. The correspondence with where geopolitical gravity is actually moving suggests something more than pattern hunger. The Earth consciousness theory. This is the interpretation that pushes farthest beyond the boundaries of mainstream science and most directly into the territory that gives this channel its name. The Gaia hypothesis, as Lovelock proposed it, describes a self-regulating Earth system. Self-regulation requires information processing. The system must have some way of detecting its current state and adjusting its behavior in response. In biological systems, information processing is associated with what we call intelligence. In the most sophisticated biological systems, it is associated with what we call consciousness. The Earth consciousness theory takes Lovelock's framework to its logical extreme. If the Earth is a self-regulating superorganism, and if self-regulation implies information processing, and if sufficiently complex information processing produces consciousness, then the Earth may be conscious in some meaningful sense. And the law of Gaia may be the expression of that consciousness, not a passive physical pattern, but an active organizational principle through which the planetary intelligence cultivates its most complex product, human civilization. In this reading, the westward movement of civilizational centers is not something that happens to the Earth. It is something the Earth does. The civilizations are not independent agents whose geographic distribution happens to follow a pattern. They are, in some sense, the pattern, expressions of a planetary organizing principle that is using human creativity, human social organization, and human cultural production as instruments of its own development. This idea is not scientifically testable in its current form. It is presented here not as a claim, but as a direction of thought. One that the convergence of the Gaia hypothesis, the civilizational pattern, and the deepest implications of Earth systems science points toward. The conspiracy theory, the conspiracy framing of the law of Gaia is specific and geopolitical. If the law of Gaia is real, if the center of world civilizational power is predictably shifting toward East Asia, then the states and institutions that currently hold dominant civilizational power have a specific interest in either denying that shift or attempting to prevent it. The United States' geopolitical posture toward China, the trade conflicts, the technology restrictions, the military positioning in the Pacific, the coalitions being assembled to constrain Chinese influence, can be read through the law of Gaia lens, not as responses to specific Chinese policies, but as reflexive attempts to hold the civilizational center in place against a pattern that is 5,000 years old and has never been successfully reversed. No previous dominant civilization has successfully stopped the shift. Rome did not stop Western Europe's rise. Britain did not stop America's rise. The conspiracy theory is not that some hidden power controls the pattern. It is that the people who should understand the pattern are reacting to it without acknowledging what they are actually responding to. A civilization that understood the law of Gaia would navigate the shift differently than one that insists the shift is not happening. And the gap between those two navigations may determine what the transition costs in human terms. Part 5. 3 specific points where the law of Gaia creates problems for the standard dismissal. First, the predictive correspondence. The most powerful argument for the law of Gaia is not its retrospective account of historical civilizational sequence that can be explained by selective pattern construction. The powerful argument is that it predicts, from a framework developed in the 1980s and 1990s, the specific geopolitical shift that mainstream analysis has independently and more recently identified as the defining feature of the 21st century. An explanatory framework that generates accurate predictions about phenomena outside the data from which it was constructed has evidential significance that retrospective pattern fitting does not. The law of Gaia predicted the Asian century before it became a standard geopolitical concept. That prediction matters. Second, the 60-degree geometry. The specific geometric unit of the law of Gaia, 60 degrees of longitude, is not arbitrary. It is 1/6 of the Earth's circumference, and 1/6 is the ratio that appears in some of nature's most stable and efficient structures: hexagonal tiling, close-packed spheres, snowflake symmetry, beehive combs. If the Earth system organizes civilizational development using the same geometric ratio that appears in its most efficient physical self-organization, that is not a coincidence to be explained away. It is a pattern to be explained. Third, the absence of counterexamples. The law of Gaia, as Yoshino formulated it, makes a specific claim: dominant civilizational centers follow the westward-moving 60-degree sequence. For the pattern to be invalid, there should be cases where a dominant civilizational center emerged at a location that does not fit the sequence, or where the sequence skipped a node, or where the movement reversed. The historical record, for the period it covers with sufficient documentation, does not produce clean counterexamples. The absence of falsifying cases across 5,000 years of history is not proof of the theory, but it is not nothing. Part 6. The law of Gaia matters right now because the shift it predicts is not a future event. It is a present one. The economic statistics are unambiguous. Asia's share of global GDP has been rising consistently for decades. China's economy, measured by purchasing power parity, has already surpassed that of the United States. The technological and innovation capacity of East Asia, in manufacturing, in artificial intelligence research, in infrastructure development, is growing faster than that of any other region. The geopolitical disruptions of the early 21st century, the trade wars, the technology Cold War, the military posturing in the South China Sea, the fracturing of the post-Cold War international order, are precisely what the law of Gaia would predict for a period of civilizational transition. Previous transitions were not peaceful or smooth. The transition from British to American dominance ran through 2 world wars. The transition from Roman to European dominance ran through centuries of dark age and conflict. What the law of Gaia suggests about the current moment is not a comfortable message. It suggests that the disruptions of the present are not aberrations to be corrected, but symptoms of a shift that is as old as civilization itself. One that has never been stopped, never been reversed, and has always been accompanied by the kind of turbulence that accompanies any fundamental reorganization of power. Understanding the law of Gaia does not tell you what to do about this, but it changes the frame through which you see it. A world in transition looks different from a world in decline. A shift in civilizational gravity feels different when you understand that it has happened before, that the previous center survived and continued to exist even as dominance moved on, and that what follows the transition is not the end of anything, but the emergence of something new. The Earth has been running this pattern for 10,000 years. The civilizations that rose and fell within it are gone. The Earth continues. That perspective is either comforting or terrifying, depending on who you are and where you are standing. Part 7. James Lovelock, who proposed the Gaia hypothesis and spent the rest of his long life. He died in 2022 at the age of 103, developing and defending it, made a statement near the end of his life that has stayed with everyone who read it. He said that the Earth is ancient and patient, that it has survived 5 mass extinction events and emerged from each one with greater complexity and diversity than before, that the current geological epoch, the one defined by human activity, is not the Earth's crisis. It is humanity's crisis. The Earth will be fine. The law of Gaia, if real, suggests that the same patience operates in the domain of human civilization. The pattern does not hurry. It does not respond to political decisions or military force or economic policy. It moves at the pace of centuries, reorganizing the geography of human power according to a schedule that no human institution designed and no human institution has ever successfully altered. We are somewhere inside that pattern right now. The specific place, the specific moment in the civilizational cycle is not agreed upon. But the direction of the movement is not seriously in dispute by anyone who looks at the data without institutional interest in a particular conclusion. East to Asia, in our lifetimes. And then, if the pattern continues, the movement goes on. 60 degrees further, across the Pacific, back toward the longitudes where the sequence began. A full rotation of the Earth. 10,000 years of human civilization making one complete turn around the planet. And then what? Does the pattern repeat? Does it spiral inward or outward? Does the Earth system that Lovelock described, patient, self-regulating, operating on timescales that dwarf any human institution, have something planned for the second rotation that it didn't do in the first? We don't know. We are, if the law of Gaia is real, the civilization at the end of the first cycle, the ones who get to watch the pattern complete itself for the first time. So here is the question I want to leave you with. If human civilization has been following a pattern it didn't design, in a direction it didn't choose, on a schedule set by something older and larger than any empire, what does that tell you about who is actually in charge? And if the shift is already happening, if the center of world power is already moving, what does it mean for the place where you are standing right now? Let me know in the comments. This has been ULW Radio. We'll see you in the next legend.